welcome back. I'm CK with Under Pressure and Power Performance, and today we're going to show you how to install one of our fuel systems on a Pontiac GTO. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, now here you can see we've pulled the fuel tank from the car, and we went ahead and pulled the whole fuel pump assembly out, giving us access to the fuel cell here. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and install our bulkhead fitting right here, and if you're looking at it, it'd be on the passenger side front corner of the fuel cell itself, and that's where our straw is going to go down and actually do the pickup for the fuel inside the tank. Alright, so now you're going to need a 37/64 drill bit, and what we're going to do is drill our hole up in the passenger side front corner of the tank here. Now go ahead and take a rag. You're going to stick your arm down from the inside and try and catch the metal shavings, but be careful that you don't drill through and drill your hand. So you're going to want to drill, really slow. Don't put a lot of pressure on it. That way when it does penetrate through, you're not jamming yourself on your hand. And make sure to get all the shavings off there, and you want to lightly brush the shavings off the top too. Make sure you keep all the shavings out of the tank because you don't want to be sucking them up into our fuel system or into the factory one. It could kind of make a mess. It might be a good idea to take a flashlight, double check down in there, or use a magnet, go around and gather up and collect the shavings that did come out of it. Alright, here you can see a nice close-up of where we've drilled the hole in the tank, and next we're going to go ahead and install our bulkhead fitting into it. Alright, next we're ready to install our bulkhead fitting. Now the bulkhead is basically going to be the bulkhead fitting here, two of these nylon washers and the nut. And what we're going to do is this is going to slide from the inside of the tank up. We're going to have a nylon washer on the bottom of the tank, on the top of the tank, and then the nut's going to lock it in place. The nylon washers are going to help create a seal around there to keep the fumes and everything else out. You're also going to need your copper tube along with the ferrule that's on it. Now there's actually the steel ferrule sleeve that's down inside, and then the nut. You're going to slide the nut on, then the steel ferrule. When you go and actually tighten this down, it'll clamp down and crush down on it. What we're going to go ahead and do, though, it's easiest if you install this first to our bulkhead, like this, outside of the car. We're going to go ahead and fish it down inside of there, and then poke it up through the hole. Now, the pickup here, we want to be facing towards all the way at the back and the bottom of the tank. That way, when you're under hard acceleration, which is when the fuel system is going to kick in, all your fuel sloshes to the back, that's where our pickup's going to be. Okay, here we can see you got the bulkhead installed, and then our pickup is going to go down, and like I said, it's going to go towards the rear and the bottom of the tank. You want it all the way at the bottom there towards the rear. And now all we got to do is tighten up the two nuts, or the bulkhead itself here, the nut on top with the bulkhead on bottom. Alright, next what we're going to do is, in the plastic fuel cover that goes on it, we're going to need to put a hole. And it's going to be a fairly good size hole. You can see it right there. Kind of around where the tag is. It's got to be right over where our bulkhead fitting is. And then we're going to do our 90-degree. Alright, now when you're installing it, the cover, you do want this to be facing towards the rear, so we're going to leave it for loose till we get the cover on. It'll help slip the cover on, and that way it kind of pries over from the back and snaps right on. Then we're going to want it to face over here towards the right, towards our passenger side. We should have enough room now to get in here and just snug that up. Now again, reminder, these are aluminum fittings. You don't want to crank them down really tight. You will strip them out. Now we've got this heading over to the right side. Go ahead and show you up inside the car where it's going to go. Alright, now we can see where the fuel line's coming out from the top there. And then we're going to come right in front of the tank here. We're going to drill a hole It does need to be a fairly good size hole because we're going to need to be able to fit the entire AN fitting through it. So what we do is we start off with a 1/2-inch drill bit, drill it out, and then use a die grinder to enlarge it. And that's where we're going to go through, and we'll meet up with that on the bottom side of the car, which is where we're going to plug into our pump. Alright, for the next part we're going to kind of blaze through it here. It's basically just going to show you how the routing is supposed to go on it. We went ahead and did most of the assembly on it, so that way it's already in there and you can kind of get a general idea of the layout. You can see this is the hole we're coming down through in the trunk here, and we're going to basically bring the line up over. We're going to shoot up over the top of the fill line there, as well as the axle, and we're going to come right across on the top of the subframe here out into the area right in here. And this is going to be just right under the rear seat. From there, our line, as you can see coming in, is going to be a straight fitting that's going to go right into our fuel filter assembly. Then we're going to have a double union on that. That's going to allow it to attach to this T-fitting. From the T-fitting, we're going to do a 90-degree turn into the fuel pump. Now pay attention to the fuel pump because there is marked on there flow going that way, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. From there, we've got the -6 to 1/8 MPT fitting in, and again -6 to 1/8 MPT fitting for out. Now we're going to go into a 90-degree bend here. This is going to be our main fuel line that's going to run the length of the car up to the front, and basically all we're doing is chasing right along the frame rail where the existing brake lines and fuel lines and everything are. And the rubber line you can see here is going to be our return. It's going to tee in right before the pump. Same thing with it, we're just going to come back over and follow the existing fuel rails down. Now we've got these hose clamp here and here. We've provided these with the kit. Just go ahead and, as necessary, bolt it up along as you go. That'll help keep it off the ground. We went ahead and zip tied it as well, as you can see, to the existing fuel rail lines. That'll keep it up. But these things are a little bit more secure than the zip ties, so they'll hold up better over time. And you can see we just periodically placed one here and there to keep it up off and guide the direction of it. And we're sitting behind the heat shield on here. That way we're not overheating it with the exhaust right there. It's basically going to follow the lines straight up to the top, and we'll continue up there to show you where they go. Okay, now for mounting the fuel pump itself, you're going to get a mounting kit, which is basically a T-bolt clamp, the bracket here, and then 2 of these little rubber things. The way this works is this clamp, or the bracket here, is going to get screwed up to the basin, and it's going to hold the T-bolt clamp like that in it, which then is going to squish down and hold the pump there. What you want to do is put one of the rubber things like that on the inside, and then we're going to have one on the outside like that. That way when we screw this thing down, it's got a little bit of vibration insulation dampening, so you don't have to listen to the fuel pump whining and going off the frame rail there. And then the pump will just basically slide in like this once we get done mounting the bracket assembly. And here we can see the fuel pump fully mounted with the assembly bracket and everything's tightened down. This thing should be nice and snug and secure up in there. Okay, now looking from above, you can see where we're coming up with our fuel line here. It's going to route right around towards the back of the engine, and then it's going to come into the side of our fuel pressure regulator. The rubber return line is going to follow the exact same path and come up, and that's going to 90 degree, right here you can see, into the bottom of our fuel pressure regulator. Then we install our check valve here. This is what keeps the 2 systems completely separate when this one's not in use. It's a check valve that'll block off the stock fuel system, so that way it can't utilize the return here from the regulator of our system that we're installing. Then right here you have your -6 to 4 adapter that's going to adapt it down, and your fuel line is going to go right across and feed the fuel rail. Now on this fuel rail here, you'll notice before you install this, there is actually a Schrader valve in it. Now a Schrader valve is the same thing that you see in your tires as far as a valve stem. So you need a Schrader valve remover tool, and you go ahead and just unscrew it, pull it back out. That way this rail is completely open and there's no blockage in it. And then our fuel lines are going to bolt right up to it there. Now the bracket that's supplied with the regulator will bolt right to the back side of it here, and then you can see right here we're bolting it to the factory stud, and that's actually one of the studs that's protruding. It's a bolt on the bottom and a stud on the top, so we're just going to go ahead and make use of the stud portion of it on the top, and then you'll be supplied with that nut right there. And that's basically the rundown of how it's hooked up and everything. Okay, now we're going to move on to the wiring side of things. Now with the wiring, basically the way that we want to hook up the system is that it's only activated when we hit 5+ psi. That's what the hob switch is that's supplied with there is preset at. It is adjustable. You can turn it up and down, and I'll show you that in just a minute. We're also going to need to wire it in with a relay because there's no circuit in here that we want to use that's has enough amperage associated with it to handle an extra pump. So what we're going to do is go ahead and wire in the relay. We're going to take power off of our main fuse box here. We're going to take a trigger off of our fuel injector. For those of you guys that have the UPP twin turbo kit, it's basically going to be the same place that we're taking the trigger to activate our system off of for the oil return pump. Now, for those of you guys aren't familiar with the relays, go ahead and check out. I've got another video up here on the uses of the relay and how they work. Real quick here, we're going to have power coming in from the fuse box going to here. And if it's not an already fused location, you do want to add an inline fuse. In this case, we've already got an inline fuse from our oil return pump. We're going to go ahead and piggyback off of that one. This here is going to be your output to the fuel pump. Now, as far as wiring, we're just basically going to route that from here, follow the fuel lines that come up, and we're just going to run it alongside right with those all the way back to where the pump is, and then we'll make a connection there. That's going to be our power for the pump. For the ground, just ground it right at the pump. You can actually use the same mounting bolt that we did for the pump bracket and just ground it right there. Next up, you're going to have your inputs to trigger it, which are going to be this guy here and this guy here. Numbers on those are actually 86 and 85. They're going to be the two. These are your two triggers, and then these are your two pass-throughs. So on one of these, you're going to need to have a power supply coming in. Again, we're going to use the signal from the injector trigger. And I'll show you that here in just a second. And then the other one, we're going to go to a ground. But before we go to a ground, we're actually going to run it through our hob switch. That way it only sees a ground on this leg, which will activate the relay, which will activate the pump when we're above 5 psi. We'll go ahead and take a look at that now. Okay. Now here we're looking at the wiring going in, and that is our injector right here. You can see that we've T-tapped into it. And there's two wires going to the injector. You're looking for the common wire, which usually on the LS base engines here, it's always going to be the pink one. To test it, you can disconnect the injector, turn the car into the on position, but don't start it. It's whichever one has 12 volts, but you have to measure it with the injector disconnected. That's the one you're going to go ahead and T-tap, and that's going to be our trigger. And you can see we run that over to our relay up here. Now, that's going to trigger our relay. The other side of the relay is actually going to come down here to our hob switch. Now this we just went ahead and tapped it in. This is our pressure source here. It's going to the intake manifold, and then this line here is going to go out to our blow-off valves up on the front of the car. So all we've done is we've T-tapped into it there, and we've made our connections here and here. Now if you're looking at the hob switch here, you're going to notice that there's actually three posts. There's a C, an NO, and an NC. Those are common, normally open, and normally closed. We're going to use the common right here, and then the normally open right here. The normally closed we don't want to use, so just pretend like this isn't there. Now that we've actually got it all wired up like this, we're going to go ahead and tape up the ends of the terminals and stuff and kind of cover it up. That way it's not shorting or grounding out against anything. We don't want to prematurely activate the fuel pump or short it out when we need to use it. So make sure that these are covered up. You can remote mount this. You can put your nipple on the end of it and run a hose and mount the hob switch actually over here, so that way you've got shorter length of wiring. just for simplicity, we elected to go ahead and do it this way here. So for the terminals, we've got a power coming in from the fuse box, which is fused on this one right here. We've got our trigger wire coming, our positive trigger wires coming rather, from the injector signal. Our negative trigger wire is going to come from over here at the Hobbs switch, from one side of the Hobbs switch. The other side of the Hobbs switch is going to come back over and go to ground. And then our output on the relay here is going to travel back, and you can see the wire running right through here. And then we actually drop it down and run it back with the fuel lines all the way back to the fuel pump, and we'll make our connections there. Okay, now you can see we've got the system pretty much fully installed here. You'll also may notice that there is a vacuum nipple on the top of the regulator here that's not connected to anything. You're going to want to leave it that way. Now if you're using this with your stock fuel system, there is a regulator that's in the trunk, or that's in the fuel tank itself. It'll constantly try to maintain the 58 psi of pressure. If you connect that up, it's a one-to-one reference, so as boost increases, it'll try and increase the pressure, which is going to overload the regulator that's in the tank there. So we just want to leave it completely open. Don't plug it, don't cap it off, don't do anything with it, just leave it open and venting to air there. If you do have an aftermarket system that no longer has the regulator in the tank, or if you convert it over, you want to use it as a full return system, then you can connect it up as a one-to-one reference. But like I said, for most of you guys who are going to be bolting this on, it's kind of designed as a supplement for the stock fuel system. You guys aren't going to be connecting that at all, so just leave it the way it is. Now, to set our fuel pressure, what you want to do is this port over here that we plugged into is actually a test port from GM to test the fuel pressure. So you want to go ahead and disconnect from there our fuel system, plug into it, and just fire up the car on base at idle and see what the fuel pressure is. It should be right about 58 psi. Then you're going to go ahead and shut it off, plug this fuel line back in. We're going to fire up, or sorry, don't fire up the car, just key it into the on position. If you short across our Hobbs switch here, that's going to activate our fuel system. So essentially the car will not be running, but our fuel system will be. Then on the top of the regulator here, you can make your adjustments. You want to set it for about 1 psi above what the factory system is. That way it's not going to overload the regulator that's in the tank, but it's also going to have enough pressure to overcome the check valve here, so that way it can provide the fuel that it's needed. So just like I said, you're going to turn the fuel system on here, so that way it's just running with the car off. Adjust the fuel pressure. In is going to be up on the pressure, out is going to be down. Once you get it where it's set, lock it in with the nut that's on top of there, and you should be ready to roll. And that about finishes it up for this install. I'm CK with Under Pressure Power and Performance. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay tuned.